between a rock and a grace place.
Hello, everybody. I'm so glad you've joined us for our study on Between a Rock and a Grace Place. And it's my prayer that the next few weeks in your life will be very encouraging as we study together how we can pull up in the middle of devastation and say there is still hope and there is a future. For how many of you has life turned out differently than you ever anticipated it would look like? A few of you? It looks like pretty much a majority. For how many of you has it been far better than you ever could have imagined? One or two? No, not many takers there. How many of you would say, overall, life has been considerably more challenging than you ever thought it would be? And if that's true for you, I tell you it is definitely true in my life. As I was thinking about what my next writing project would be, I got a wonderful email from my sister, and she's here with me today. This is Jenny. And she said, Carol, I've been reading in Romans 9:33, and there is a verse that I really believe is supposed to be for you. And as I read it in that email, God spoke to my spirit because it truly felt like my story. Careful, I've put a huge stone on the road to Mount Zion, a stone you can't get around, but the stone is me. If you're looking for me, you'll find me on the way, not in the way. And I want you to know, as you and I press against the obstacles in our lives, if we are women of faith, we are going to discover that we can press into the grace place, the place of unconditional love, the place of comfort and compassion and renewed hope. And that's what this study is all about. I pray that you will be surprised by faith. Well, I got married to Gene Kent 2 months after we graduated from college. We didn't have 2 dimes to rub together, but we had love. And you really can make it on love if you have helpful family members and friends who feed you occasionally and take you in. And maybe you've experienced that too. 5 years later, I gave birth to Jason Paul Kent. We call him JP. And he was a delight to raise. In one of his early pictures, he has a twinkle in his eye and he's wearing a little sailor suit. And he did love the water, and he grew up to be in the Navy. As he got a little bit older, I was one of those mothers who made him sit for a formal picture once a year. And when he got a little older and looked at one of those photographs, he said, Mom, I can't believe you honestly made me wear velvet knickers. How embarrassing is that? Well, I was sharing that story at the Bavarian Inn Conference Center in Frankenmuth, Michigan, and as that picture went up on the screen, I looked around and every male waiter in the whole place was wearing an outfit almost exactly like that one. So I guess I wasn't that mean of a mother after all. Jason got a little bit older and he got involved in Little League. And we would go to those games, and as dutiful parents, we would sit in the bleachers and we would watch Jason get up to bat, and he would strike once, strike twice, strike 3 times, and he would walk back to the bench. And we tried to talk to him about the fact that it isn't whether or not you win the game that matters, but it's the relationships you develop in the process of playing the game that really count, and the lessons learned along the way. And those were fun days for us. By the time he got into high school, he made his parents proud. He was president of the National Honor Society. And in between his sophomore and junior years of high school, he went off to a Christian camp in Colorado, and he came home with renewed spiritual vigor. He said, Mom, I really believe that God wants me to serve in military and maybe even in political leadership. And I believe the best place I could get equipped to do that would be at the United States Naval Academy. He finally received the appointment to the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland, and I'll never forget being there on graduation day in May of 1997 when on national television all of those midshipmen tossed their hats in the air and we once again celebrated JP's accomplishments. I was at a time in my life when I thought the good times would last forever. Some time went by. He was now in nuclear engineering school in Orlando, Florida, and he joined a great church. There were 300 young adults in Bible studies, and some of them were women. And Jason got very interested in Bible study. Now, I'm sure it was the Bible that he was interested in, right? Well, I think the girls were pretty intriguing too, and by the end of that summer, he had a new interest in his life. My husband and I were in Denver where I was speaking at an arena event, and we called home for messages. And on voicemail, Jason said, "Mom and Dad, some things are coming down. We have to talk." It's at a moment like that you wish your child would add 2 or 3 more sentences about what indeed is coming down. Well, we got a hold of him later, and he said, "My orders have changed. I have to be at Surface Warfare Officer School in Newport, Rhode Island on September 8. April and I are in love, and we want to get married next Friday so we can go together." My only child was not only asking to marry a woman I had never met next Friday, he was asking to marry a previously married woman who had 2 children next Friday, and that was not on my agenda for my son's life. Well, I have a different temperament than my husband. I have occasional highs, occasional lows, and Gene is just steady. He's very steady. And he kept that conversation going while I had a little dialogue with God. I said, "Hello, Lord, we have a problem here." And I got back on the phone, and I realized my boy was in love. He was definitely getting married, and we had a choice. We could either choose to get on board, or we could cause a rift that just might last a lifetime. We talked them into being married 3 weeks later in our hometown with the accountability of family and friends around us. And a week and a half later, April came into our lives. I saw Jason and April walk through the front door with their arms encircled around each other's waists, and oh, they were in love. Behind them in came 6-year-old Chelsea and 3-year-old Hannah. Within a half hour, little Chelsea came rushing up to me, grabbed my hand in her 2 hands, and she kissed all over it and said, "You're my new favorite Grammy." Well, that was working. Little Hannah would sit at my kitchen counter, and in between her bites of cereal every morning, she sang songs about how much she loved Jesus. Oh, I loved these children deeply. It was so much fun. I became a mother-in-law and Grammy Carol on the very same day, and we were looking forward to a great life for our little family members. During that first year of their marriage, there was an issue that came up repeatedly. There were multiple allegations of abuse against the biological father of Chelsea and Hannah, and he was trying to get unsupervised visitation. Jason and April sought legal counsel, and it appeared that this man would be with his daughters without supervision. In retrospect, we began to see our son unravel mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And after 1 year went by, it was a beautiful fall day. And I remember being outside walking along the St. Clair River in our then hometown of Port Huron, Michigan. I was hand in hand with my husband, and as I looked at the beauty of the sky and the water and the trees, I said, "Honey, does life get any better than this?" And little did I realize that in less than 2 weeks, everything about our future would change. We had been in St. Louis for a weekend of ministry, and we were sound asleep. It was a Sunday night. I looked at the clock as Gene picked up the phone, 12:35 a.m. I saw a look of shock and horror come over my husband's face, and he said, "Carol, Jason has just been arrested for the murder of his wife's first husband." I found myself filled with nausea, and I tried to get out of bed, and my legs would not hold my weight. I crawled myself into the bathroom and eventually into my office, and my first thought was, I am living in the middle of a horrific nightmare. I will soon wake up and everything will be okay. But as hour followed hour, the facts of the case were confirmed. Our son had indeed pulled a trigger in a public parking lot, and a man had died. And we began our journey between a rock and a hard place. As day followed day, I could hardly breathe. And the enemy would come at me with his taunting little messages and accusations. And one of them went like this: if you had been a better mother, this would not have happened. And then he attacked my spiritual life. He said, if you had prayed and read your Bible more often, this would not have happened. And then he attacked my birth order, which is firstborn of 6 preachers' kids. That means I'm bossy, a little obsessive compulsive, a bit driven, and I am a workaholic. And he said, if you had been less busy, you could have stopped this thing before it started. Lies, lies, lies. We went through 2.5 years and 7 postponements of Jason's trial before he was eventually convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life without the possibility of parole in the state of Florida. In that state, that means the rest of your natural life. It's called a toe tag sentence. It means you will never again leave a Florida state penitentiary until you are dead on a slab with a tag on your toe. It is the rest of your life, which is pretty hard for this mother to hear. Mother Teresa once said, I know God will not give me anything I can't handle. I just wish he didn't trust me so much. Maybe you can identify with that thought. I must admit there were days when I felt a little bit like Job in the Bible. And maybe you've said, Lord, I've tried to live my life for you. I've tried to raise my kid right. I remember praying for Jason when he was in my womb, that he would come to an early faith in Jesus Christ and that he would live his life for things that would outlast him for God's glory. Well, remember Job? He encountered unthinkable circumstances. His livestock was stolen, servants were murdered, his children were killed, his health disintegrated, and then he had this not-so-encouraging wife who in Job 2:9 said, curse God and be done with it. Now, I never quite got that far. I had a firm faith rooted in me from the time I was a very little girl. But Job's response is shocking in the light of his trials. This is how he responds. We take the good days from God. Why not also the bad days? That's pretty hard medicine to stomach. Do you know that as we read the Bible, we learn that God blessed Job's later life even more than his earlier life? He ended up with a whole lot of livestock. He had more children and enjoyed 4 generations of offspring before he died at a ripe old age. And that does remind me that there can be life after devastating circumstances. I remember thinking, what happened to the faith of my son? What is faith anyway? And many of us have read Hebrews 11:1, and it gives us the biblical definition of what faith really is. Now, faith is being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see. And I think the toughest question in all of that is to try to figure out which part of faith is God's part and which part is my personal choice. And that can be a mystery for a while. Well, throughout this study, you will be hearing my son's voice through letters that he has written in the middle of his journey. And as he thought back on what happened in his mind and heart before such a devastating situation, this is what he wrote. Dear Mom and Dad, as I write now, almost 10 years removed from the horrific day my mind snapped, it is almost impossible to recall exactly what led up to my devastating actions.
I remember the intensity of my emotional angst as my ability to protect my beloved stepdaughters appeared to be slipping away. My wife and I sought legal counsel from a highly recommended lawyer, but nothing we did to protect the girls from what I believed was an imminent threat to their safety appeared to be working. I imagined my daughters coming to me in the future, sobbing, Daddy, couldn't you have done anything to protect us? In my determination not to abandon my little girls, I was losing my grip on reality and my ability to reason. As part of the volunteer military, I was willing to stand in harm's way on behalf of my country. While I was still a student at the U.S. Naval Academy, I had to decide if I was willing to lay down my life to protect American citizens. I knew I could, and no father would hesitate to sacrifice his life for his children. I was no different. Now a battle was raging within me between my faith in God and what I felt I had to do to protect my girls. I know I have caused so much agony, and I can only imagine the pain I have caused the father of the man I killed. I have stolen from him his relationship with his son. My lack of faith in God led me to make a devastating choice that reaped death, devastation, grief, and destruction of everything my life had previously represented.
As JP's letter ends, I'm reminded that choosing faith means putting our hopes, our dreams, and even our fears into God's hands. I'm so encouraged by a great declaration in Lamentations 3:22 and 24. I keep a grip on hope. God's loyal love could not have run out. His merciful love couldn't have dried up. They're created new every morning. How great is your faithfulness? I'm sticking with God. He's all I've got left. Do you ever feel like that? When you and I are stuck between a rock and a hard place, we have a choice. Will we give in to the sadness, to the despair, to the depression? Or will we, in a posture of humility and complete dependence on God, choose faith in the middle of our journey? Jason is learning some of the very same lessons that I've needed to learn. Now, more than a decade into this journey, here's what I've noticed about my son. He has an enriched relationship with God. That's very precious for this mother to see. He's also been humbled in a way that has been paradoxically liberating to his spirit. And he has had a chance to find purpose and meaning by investing his time in helping other inmates and enriching their lives through what he knows about the Lord. He wrote not too long ago, "Mom, I hate prison, but I refuse to waste prison."
I choose to believe that God still has a purpose for me in spite of what I have done and the consequences I'm living with. I'm committed to looking for opportunities to make a positive difference in the lives of the men around me. And my prayer is that these men, if they are eventually released, will never return here. I'm praying they will be good husbands and fathers and productive members of society when they leave this place. If that happens, my time here is not wasted.
As I think about you and me in the middle of our own rock and hard place, I'm reminded that when we choose faith in the middle of this unexpected journey, there are powerful benefits that surprise us. We have eyes to see the pain of others. We have hearts of compassion. And we have a determination to provide tangible help. And that's exactly what God did in our lives. I'm discovering that God works best through broken people. And I'm just a broken-hearted mama who knows with God's help I can have hope and a future because Jesus lives and this life is not all there is. You may not have a son in prison, but you may have had a child born with a disability and you know it is permanently altering the rest of your life. Maybe the doctor's called and has told you that you or someone you love has cancer and things are looking a bit grim and it's been tough. You feel between a rock and a hard place. Maybe the spouse who promised to love you forever has betrayed you and left you for somebody else. You feel alone and discouraged and you really don't know if you can cling to your faith anymore because it's just too hard. Maybe you've looked at your bank account and your finances are dwindling and you're not really sure what your next step is. I want to encourage you to look around and be surprised by faith. You'll find God in the most unlikely places. Throughout this study, you'll have an opportunity to evaluate where you are in your spiritual journey. And I hope you will enjoy the individual activities, but I especially hope you enjoy the small group discussions where you'll be able to talk with people in your group about what's going on in your life. And here's a place where you can be safe, where you can share from the heart level and know that what you talk about will not be talked about outside this circle. I hope that you'll remember especially what Oswald Chambers said. Faith is deliberate confidence in the character of God whose ways you may not understand at the time. As you do this study, don't feel like you have to have faith for your whole journey right now. Just put one foot in front of the other and keep on trusting God in the middle of your circumstances, and you will find yourself surprised by faith. You can count on it.